It is my pleasure now to introduce our keynote speaker for the convention, Matt Longland. He's the Chief Executive of Sydney Trains. Matt's been there for 4 months. He's accounted for more than 11,000 staff, delivering a safe, reliable and efficient passenger rail service for the Greater Sydney, and managing and maintaining the rolling stock, stations and the rail infrastructure network. This morning, Matt will address how Sydney Trains has managed the complex operations through this challenging COVID time and outline the future priorities for Sydney Trains, including a focus on customers, integrated service planning, growth and technology-enabled operations. So welcome, Matt.
Thanks very much, Mark, and good morning everyone in the room and also joining us online today in the live stream. I'd like to start today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on here today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and invite you to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land wherever you're located around the state or indeed the nation of Australia. As an industry, I think we've got a proud history of working closely with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, particularly providing employment opportunities and pathways, and I think it's a continuing focus for us, particularly at Sydney Trains, to look at what we can do to advance the cause of reconciliation within Australia. Thank you to the PWI for the opportunity to join you here today for your state conference. It is indeed a shame that we can't be meeting entirely in person. I certainly value the opportunity to connect with industry at every opportunity. As Mark said, I'm about 4 months into my role here at Sydney Trains. It's certainly been an interesting period since mid-June when I joined the organisation, with dealing with the Delta strain of COVID and the impacts that created across not only our network but across the whole sector, and the ability of people to come together to deal with adversity and to show their flexibility and their resilience in terms of being able to work our way through it. And we're certainly hoping that we're coming out the other end into what is a new normal period and hopefully a more stable period ahead. I would like to acknowledge the PWI and the great work that you do. Thank you to the sponsors, particularly the platinum sponsors, for the work that you do and the support you provide to this very important part of industry. It's really an opportunity for collaboration, whether that's in the government sector, consulting sector, research, engineering, or the operations area. An ability for leaders to come together and collaborate on ideas and information sharing, but it's also an opportunity to invest in the youth and to sponsor young professionals. And it was great to hear that we'll be acknowledging a new young professional later on in today's agenda. As I said, I'm relatively new into the Sydney Trains team, and it's been an interesting journey so far. I think the theme of today's conference, the rail to recovery, is a really apt theme. I think that we've all learned a lot during this period of COVID, both the role that we play in delivery of services, in opening up the economy again, whether that's in Sydney or New South Wales or other parts of Australia, or indeed internationally. Public transport and reliable transport services provide a really important opportunity to open up cities and get people moving around again confidently. And equally, the investment in capital infrastructure project delivery is vitally important, both to deliver the benefits that we need for future operations into the future of tomorrow's services, but also the role that projects play in creating job opportunities and stimulating the economy and driving employment opportunities across cities and regions throughout Australia. I know rail certainly has a very proud history of opening up the nation, whether that's in cities or in regions, and I think at this time industry coming together to look at what we can do to support the economic recovery post-COVID is indeed very important. What I'll do today is I'll talk through just a small number of slides just to really give you a sense for who I am. This is an opportunity for me to connect with industry in terms of my background, but also I'll look at both Sydney Trains, where we're at in terms of our current performance and priorities, what we've done during COVID and how we've looked to come out the other end of it better and stronger, and also focus on future priorities. So what are the things that we're working on that will make a difference to our operation into the future, which I know are very important in terms of the way that we collaborate with industry. I know we've got a lot of Sydney Trains team online today, so I do want to acknowledge the work that our team have done and thank everyone for the work that they've done during this period to continue to deliver such reliable services and continue to be able to support the recovery coming out the other end. So, starting with just a little bit about me, unlike many on the line today or in the room, I'm not an engineer. I'm a proud town planner, actually. My interest in transport is really about the role that great transport plays in creating great cities and regions. So it's really a key enabler in providing sustainable, livable and productive cities. Having said that, I've been in the industry now for about 20 years, relocated from Queensland only in June of this year, about 1 week before the Premier of Queensland closed the Queensland border. So I've spent that time since then here in Sydney. But I come with, I guess, some fairly broad experience across the transport sector, primarily in integrated transport. So planning, project delivery, service delivery, operations. Previously the head of TransLink in Queensland, administering public transport services across Queensland. I guess you could say I'm a bit of a transport geek. I like seeing the difference that we make, and I know that's what drives a lot of people that work in our sector, whether you're building things or operating things or planning for the future. The work that we do as a sector makes a real difference to the way that cities and regions operate, and is absolutely critical in providing the opportunities for the community to go about their daily business. It's an interesting sector, but it's something that I love doing, and certainly very excited about the new opportunities that have opened up here in Sydney. And I think it's a very exciting time in New South Wales in terms of the investment that's going into not only the rail network, but right across the transport sector. It's an exciting time ahead, a very strong pipeline of activity and investment, and it's great to be a part of that, albeit during this challenging period of COVID. Moving to just, I guess, some early thoughts, albeit I'm 3 or 4 months into my new role here in Sydney, what I've seen, what I've learnt, and what's sort of standing out as the key opportunities in the way that we're working within Sydney Trains. I guess starting with the operations, I mean, Sydney is Australia's largest city. Sydney Trains is Australia's busiest railway. A large and complex network, 3,200 timetabled services every day. So it's an operation that is absolutely vital for the way that Sydney moves and the way that people move around this very large city. We've seen very rapid growth throughout the late sort of teens, that sort of 2015 through to 2019. Double-digit growth year on year in terms of public transport patronage, customers moving onto rail, 420 million customers per annum pre-COVID. So to put that in perspective, I think someone was saying that's the combined total of Brisbane, Melbourne and Perth put together. Sydney, the patronage in Sydney exceeds that. So it's a really significant operation, strong growth leading up to that pre-COVID period. But what that's created in the way that we operate is quite a complex network that is stretched fairly tightly, and we've seen when we move into degraded mode, whether that's from a weather event, a customer event or a major infrastructure issue, it is a network that when it's under strain is quite challenging to manage. So for me, it's about thinking about the opportunity post-COVID, and I'll talk a little bit about what's happened to patronage and where we're headed. But for me, the opportunity around our operations is to think about this little period that we've got of recovery, where we're not managing that number of customers. How do we actually build back better, build back stronger, make the network more resilient and more reliable in terms of the way that we operate? Fantastic legacy from my predecessor, Howard Collins, in the Rail Operations Centre. The ROC is a fantastic facility. The real opportunity that we've got now is to start to overlay new technology and new ways of working into that facility to ensure that we can build back better and build into a more resilient and sustainable operation into the future. Customers and the customer experience. As I said, I've got a long history in working across all modes of public transport. In my 20 years, I've never seen customer satisfaction at the levels that it is in Sydney. 93% of our customers are satisfied at the most recent customer satisfaction survey we did in July of this year. So that indicates that whilst we need a lot of customers to come back, we're not carrying as many customers as we once were pre-COVID. Those that are travelling are generally very satisfied. The presentation of the network and the work that was done in the early sort of 2012 through to 2015, the Fixing the Trains program, a very strong focus on cleaning the network, freshening things up, station environment, rolling stock. We're seeing the benefit of that in a fantastic presentation across the network. Rolling stock, you can see on the screen that's our most recent train, B41, the last train of our Sydney Growth Trains package. The Waratahs are a fantastic train. So first Waratah is now 10 years old. That B41 there's only a few months old, but Waratahs now make up about 2/3 of our fleet. They are our most reliable train, and they are the train that drivers most like to drive in terms of the way that they operate. So we've got the basics in terms of good station environments, staff that are focused on the right things in terms of customer experience, and a good rolling stock and fleet to build from. What we are seeing with customers, though, is changing expectations about how they travel, and particularly about how they move between modes as part of an integrated journey. So we need to do more work, and we are doing work within the transport cluster, whether that's trains and metro, as metro rolls out further into the city and southwest out to Bankstown. How do customers move between modes, metro to train, light rail to our network, ferries, buses? It's really about an integrated planning, payment, and a system that allows customers to move seamlessly between modes. So whilst rail customers are very happy, I think we need to focus on how customers move between modes into the future. There's also investment that we need in digital technology, mobile technology, making it easier for people, removing the barriers for people moving around on public transport, particularly as the tourism sector opens up and we start to see visitors re-emerge back into Sydney and into New South Wales. Sustainability, really proud of the work we're doing and the focus on sustainability. You may have seen in the media clips in the last couple of weeks, Sydney Trains is the first passenger railway in Australia to achieve net zero emissions from our electricity consumption. So that's something that we've been working on for a little while now. The state government commitment was 2025. We've hit that almost 3 or 4 years early. So we are the second largest consumer of electricity in New South Wales through our traction power requirements. We are now 100% net zero, which I think is a fantastic role to play in leading the sector and encouraging others to come on this journey with us as we move to a more sustainable operation. Sustainability is also about resilience, particularly climate resilience, and that very much flows through to the work we're doing in innovation around infrastructure and ensuring that what we're building, what we're managing, accommodates for what will be more significant climatic impacts into the future. Flooding, bushfires, we've seen a lot here in New South Wales in the last couple of years, and I think the work we're doing and the innovation we're using is really about ensuring we can prepare for the future, that we can manage the network in different ways to accommodate what will be different climatic conditions into the future. We're also doing good work across our energy consumption. So we've committed to 10% reduction in energy consumption up to 2025. Good work happening on rolling stock, both with some of our HVAC settings. We're looking at regenerative power. We're also rolling out solar across a number of our major work sites to look at what we can do within our operations to manage energy in a much more sustainable way. Safety. Obviously, safety underpins everything we do, not only at Sydney Trains, but in the rail industry generally. And the safety performance, the safety systems are very good, they're very solid, but we always need to continue to focus on how we can make the network safer for our people and also for our customers. And I'm particularly interested in work we're doing around track worker safety. I think along with other networks around Australia, we've got a way to go. Our colleagues that are working internationally in the UK and Europe, I think are using technology in ways that is reducing track worker risk. They're well ahead of where we're at in Australia and New Zealand, and I think there's an opportunity for us to start to embed some of that thinking and some of that new technology to reduce the risk for our people and the interactions they have on the network each day. In terms of our people, clearly it's a large organisation and a very diverse workforce across a whole range of different industry sectors and different professional qualifications. Our people, as with many of the others that will speak to you today and organisations in our sector, our people see their role as a career, not as a job. They take a lot of pride in the railway, and they're also very passionate about what they do. They see their role not as teammates, but as part of the railway family. And that's something that I think is inherent in the way that people work within the railway. The challenge for us is to really start to strengthen that connection and start to focus on new ways of working and bringing our people with us as we start to build the railway of the future. Particularly important that we work closely with unions. And I know for those here in Sydney, we've got industrial action again today on our network. We've had action on and off over the last month or so as we work through a new enterprise agreement with our 7 different unions. My role is very much about being able to bring unions and the organisation closer together and ensure that we're on the same pathway and that we can actually work with each other to start to think about opportunities to change the way that we work. So that's something that's absolutely a focus for us at the moment. Moving specifically to COVID. So it may be a little difficult to see on the screen. What you can see on the left is clearly some very significant impacts on patronage. So the far left is moving sort of the first COVID wave in what is a normal sort of a regular patronage cycle. Very, very significant impacts last year. Then we saw a recovery into sort of mid-year this year. And then since that time, with the significant changes to health orders and the restrictions around mobility, a real drop away in patronage through July through to September. We're starting to see recovery, albeit it's off quite a low base. So at the moment, we're a little bit less than 30% of our normal pre-COVID patronage. So we've got 70% of growth to continue to come out the other side. We have seen in the last week and a half, since Sydney has started to open up again, people coming back onto the network, which is encouraging, particularly for weekend and evening travel. So we're seeing strong demand in periods outside the peak as people are starting to move around Sydney again. But clearly, we've got a long way to bounce back. What we've seen through COVID is that, like every other environment that brings lots of people together, customers are quite nervous about congregating in large spaces, and I think we need to keep working on building customer confidence in travelling together in the work that we're doing to keep the network safe. The objectives through COVID were really 3 sort of key objectives. The first one was about keeping customers and our people safe, and that was our primary objective. The second one was keeping the services operating for those that needed them. So we kept the timetable running all the way through this period, and that was about supporting health workers, a lot of tradies that rely on our network to move around, to keep the economy open and keep services moving for those that needed them. And the third area of focus was really about supporting New South Wales Health and other parts of government in being able to respond and recover to this COVID period. And, you know, very pleased to see that we've been able to come through the period the way that we have. We've seen impacts both in the way that we work. Clearly, people are moving to online working rather than face-to-face. We saw big changes to the way that we maintained the network. We really stepped back from our full range of possessions across the network into moving to safety critical works. We're now on the path out of that period into full scope of works, and I'm out with the team tomorrow. We've got a major possession in Sydney this week. What we will see, though, is a significant backlog of major works and engineering that we need to catch up on. So we kept safety critical works moving. We do need, over this next 6 months, to look at some innovation in the way that we manage possessions to ensure that we can get people on track to catch up on some of that key engineering activity. So we'll start to see a full program of possessions resume across Sydney in our network in around about November, December, so it's not too far away. We also changed the way that we operate the network. We stepped back in July into what we call the dynamic timetable. So we moved to a less frequent service to make sure that we could maintain reliability across the day, given that we were carrying such a lower number of customers. We've now moved back into a full service timetable, but the way that we worked and the way that we moved and the responsiveness and the agility was something that I haven't seen in the past, certainly in a rail environment. So we can learn from that and start to include some of that thinking in the way that we manage the network into the future. What you also saw here in New South Wales, lots of green dots, to really help customers understand where they could sit and stand while they were travelling to maintain social distance. We were the only network in Australia to roll out green dots. We've still got them on the network. We moved from 25% to 50% COVID safe capacity last month, and we will move at some point in coming weeks into 75% capacity. So we'll start to move back to what would be a normal operation across the rail and other modes of public transport. We also saw a very strong uptake in digital technology in the way that we work and in the way that customers interface into understanding what's happening on the network. And again, I think there are opportunities to leverage some of that thinking into the future. Looking specifically at recovery, journey to work in Sydney is about 60% of our market. So it's a significant part of the patronage that we carry. The people that we move each day are coming to and from work. We know that market has been significantly impacted through COVID, and that we're seeing office-based workers continuing to work flexibly, and they may continue working in a hybrid way into the future. So that's an area that we need to understand the preferences of customers, and as the CBD starts to open up again, how do we support customers coming back into the city as part of their journeys to work? The work that we've done indicates that it may take a number of years to get back to pre-COVID patronage. It's back to our 420 million passengers each year. For me, that's not about putting on the handbrake and stopping delivering projects and reallocating funding. It's actually about using this opportunity to, while we've not got the growth pressures, to catch up, prepare for the future and build back better in terms of the way that we're actually building the rail network into the future. So that's something that I think, a few years in the railway is a heartbeat, and I don't see that this is going to be a significant impact long term. The demographic drivers, the economic drivers are very strong, both here in Greater Sydney and also in other major cities in Australia. Rail will continue to be the major way that customers move at scale around cities, and that will continue to be the case, and we need to continue to invest to ensure that we've got the network as customers come back, and particularly as tourism starts to open up here in Sydney and in other major centres across Australia. Moving just in the time I've got left into priorities for what's ahead of us. So I've talked a little bit about my early thoughts about what I've seen and where we're at here in Sydney at Sydney Trains, where we're headed into the future. So clearly, always the case with a railway, safe, efficient, reliable operations. You cannot take your eye off the ball, and we're only as good as our last peak period. We work in an issue-rich environment. Anyone who's caught a train is an expert at rail operations and network operations and infrastructure and rolling stock, and they've got no shortage of ideas about how we should be operating the network. We need to continue to focus on providing a good, safe, reliable network for customers into the future, and that will always be the number one priority here at Sydney Trains. Secondly, integrated service planning and growth. As I said, COVID has opened up the opportunity to rethink what sort of service would we operate into the future with a different journey to work market. So Traditionally, railways and all other modes of public transport, and indeed the road network, is based around two very significant peaks each day. So lots and lots of capacity for a very, very small part of the day in the AM and the PM peak. COVID has opened up the opportunity to rethink how we actually manage supply to influence demand. So we're very focused on, not just in the rail network, but across the public transport network, how do we ensure that we're providing options for customers to encourage them to think differently about how they travel, particularly times of day and days of the week, so that we're actually getting more efficient use out of the capacity that we've got available on the rail network. And the integrated planning is very important, that rail will always be the backbone of the public transport network. But we are one mode of many modes, and we need to ensure that what we're doing is connected, particularly from a customer perspective, across the broader network. Very important. Technology and technology-enabled operations, and I know is a big focus for the PWI and a big focus for members and the work you're doing with us on a number of projects. The most significant is obviously the work we're doing on digital systems, the rollout of our new European Train Control Signalling Level 2, which we're on the first stage of the rollout at the moment, and working through the progressive implementation through a number of business cases we're taking to government. I see that as a real step change in the way that we operate the railway. Very, very important that we don't just overlay this technology on traditional ways of working. That will create significant risk in trying to customise this new technology to fit our operation. It will also mean that we don't get the benefit out of the new ways of working and more modern ways of doing things in the railway and the way that we operate. So very important that in the implementation of new technology, we look at how we can change the way that we work to ensure that we're getting the most benefit out of that investment. Sydney Trains isn't an end-to-end. We don't do everything in rail. We are an operator-maintainer. So our job on the value chain, if you like, is around service delivery. It's in the 0 to 3 sort of 5-year time frame. We need to work closely with the broader Transport for New South Wales cluster, particularly in the strategy setting, in the development and delivery of rail projects to support efficient operations into the future. So that's a different way of working for our team, and it's about ensuring that the way that we work is quite collaborative, both within transport and also, most importantly, with industry. I think we've got a fantastic depth of expertise here in Australia and New Zealand, and we are doing some amazing things. You know, my experience in public transport is that we often look internationally, we look to the UK, we look to Europe as being best in class. I think we are doing some best in class things already here in Australia and New Zealand. The challenge for us is about how we can collaborate and connect through opportunities like the PWI to bring that innovation to the fore, to connect the right people across the sector, and to look at ways that we can drive new partnerships to ensure that we can learn from what others have done and we can actually move together as we build into the future, particularly linking to technology. I know that there's rollouts. I was on the project board for ETCS in Queensland, so I'm familiar with the project in Queensland. There's work happening in Victoria. There's work happening on the freight network. What's missing for me is really a connection between those networks to make sure that we can move forward as a sector. And this very small number of experts and suppliers that operate in this field can actually understand that we're connected in terms of the way that we're working. So big opportunities in terms of partnerships. I would have loved to have been in person at a major event to be able to actually meet a number of our key industry partners. But I do encourage everyone that's joining us today to please reach out, if you haven't already, to connect, particularly now that we're able to meet again in person. I'm keen to hear what's happening across industry, and I'm absolutely committed to working with industry to look for opportunities to change the way that we work and collaborate on some of the new challenges that lie ahead of us. In conclusion, I just wanted to reiterate a couple of the key points. COVID has been a challenging period, and we're not out of that period yet. We've moved from response into recovery. So as we recover, the real focus for us here in New South Wales is how do we build back better? How do we become agents of change rather than victims of change? How do we think about leading industry out of this period that we're in to create a safer, more reliable, more efficient railway network into the future? And that relies on us working together. to do that. Very last slide, in the last minute I've got left. Small plug for those, and I know everyone in the rail industry is obviously watching this show anyway. Inside Central is a behind-the-scenes look into the operations at Sydney Trains. It's been just fantastic. So I think we're 8 episodes into 10. The episode this weekend is about the Mardi Gras. It's one of the highlights. So if anyone hasn't been watching that, you can catch up on SBS On Demand. It has been a real, for our people, to see that the work that they do is acknowledged, and for outsiders from the rail industry to understand all of the activity that goes on behind the scenes, infrastructure, operations, to enable the network to operate every day has been phenomenal. So encourage you to have a look at Inside Central, learn a bit more about Sydney Trains if you haven't seen it, and please take the opportunity to connect in person when the opportunity presents itself. Thank you to Mark and thank you to the team for having me today, and I wish you all the best for the rest of your conference. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Great presentation. Thanks very much for your time. Great to get an opportunity to have someone like Matt to come along and present today to the PWI and set the scene for our conference, which is Rail to Recovery. A couple of things we were keen to get Matt to talk about. One was introduce him to probably a wider network of the PWI members and teams across the country, but also to hear about what Sydney Trains has been doing in this period of COVID and some of the lessons we've learnt. I think all the industries have actually taken this as an opportunity to really challenge the way we're doing things. Sit back and actually come up with, can we work smarter and more efficiently, which we've had to do. And I think it's great to see some of the things that have been pushed through with Sydney Trains. I think as we move into the future, I think, and we look at this road to recovery, which is what we're talking about today, and a number of the presenters will actually talk about this. We've been able to use what's actually happened through COVID as a bit of a catalyst to move that forward. But also when we look at the economic growth for the country, and we've got to get out of this financial position that we're in, that really rail and infrastructure will be the catalyst that drives us forward. So a great presentation from Matt this morning, set the scenes brilliantly. So thanks again, Matt, for your time.
Thank you.